Antarctica is many things: extremely cold, extremely vast, mostly unspoiled, and a wholly unique environment in our world. But there are some who claim that there's more to it than that, and the true nature of Antarctica is now a major part of modern flat Earth conspiracy theories. So the infamous theory goes, Earth isn't a globe, it's flat instead. But if that were true, then what would happen at the edge of our world? One idea says that really we're surrounded by an enormous ice wall. It's this wall which stops us from ever traveling too far and discovering the truth about the enormous disk we supposedly live on. According to some variations, the wall also serves to keep us contained by preventing all of Earth's water from spilling out into space. And as for the wall's location, it's said that it can be found at the heart of what we now commonly call Antarctica. The theory then rounds itself off by claiming that world powers and governments know all about the ice wall but continually deny its existence. The reasons for which no one's entirely sure of. Flat Earthers have claimed all sorts of evidence down the years, though, which they say proves that Antarctica is a continent full of secrets. For example, one prop often referred to is the azimuthal equidistant projection map of the world. While this map is just one of many maps of Earth that differ from the most commonly produced one, called the Mercator projection, it's of particular interest to Flat Earthers as some versions of it do seemingly show a wall of ice encircling the rest of the world. It doesn't matter that not all versions show the ice, nor that the map never claims that a wall actually exists. As an image, it's become quite iconic for the Flat Earth theory, especially as one version of this map features on the logo of the United Nations. Another key point of interest for Flat Earthers, however, is the 1961 Antarctic Treaty, which it's claimed stops anybody from ever going to the South Pole. But what exactly does the treaty address? First and foremost, it was the creation of the Cold War era, aiming to restrict where nuclear weapons could be tested, and is therefore seen as something of a precursor to the much more notable 1967 Outer Space Treaty. The Antarctic Treaty marks off territories that shouldn't be used for military purposes then, but it also specifically prioritizes the preservation of Antarctica's unique ecosystem. Because despite its remoteness, Antarctica does have plenty of endemic species. Most notable among them, the emperor penguin, the largest penguin in the world. But there are also plenty of seals, invertebrates, and plants and fungi that are exclusive to this continent. The Antarctic Treaty was largely written up to protect them, especially because when humans began investigating Antarctica in the 1800s, they brought with them various invasive species that threatened the pristine lands. There may have been other motivations behind the Antarctic Treaty too, though. It might be, for example, be seen as a means of limiting who gets to control the land. The traditional 20th century global superpowers, those more impacted by the Outer Space Treaty, for example, aren't all that close to Antarctica geographically. Today, the country claiming the most territory there is Australia by a huge margin, while the likes of the US, Russia, China, and India, the leading superpowers of space, haven't yet staked a claim. On the one hand, this begs the question of why American government agencies like NASA, so often implicated in flat Earth theories, would be in on the idea that Antarctica is actually a huge and secret wall. But on the other, it's argued by flat Earth theorists that the attempt to regulate the use of Antarctica is all part of an international effort to keep the truth of the place under wraps. Perhaps the strongest counter-argument here, though, is that it's not really the case that the treaty stops anybody from going to this most mysterious land. It bans military activity there, yes, but not scientific activity. And there are lots of bases and outposts in Antarctica right now conducting important research. There are some limited opportunities for tourism too, with Antarctic cruises gaining popularity. So much so that now tens of thousands of people visit Antarctica every year. It's still true that our most southerly continent is a wholly unforgiving place, however, and many explorers have died trying to explore it. But many expeditions, including the infamous Terra Nova expedition, which ended with the deaths of 5 British pioneers, are and were funded and endorsed by the world's governments and even the world's public. One major problem with the ice wall theory, then, is why would the global establishment support science and exploratory missions to Antarctica if it had a vested interest in keeping people in the dark about what's really there? The flat Earth theory triggers the question but can't provide the answers, other than the whole thing being a multifaceted international cover-up. Significantly, reports in 2019 claimed that a group of flat earthers had announced that they were going to fund their own expedition to Antarctica to see and prove the ice wall theory. But that mission never happened, or at least was later denied by the group, and so the proof was never found. Nevertheless, it shouldn't be forgotten that it is at least difficult to get into Antarctica, and access is often restricted. You'd struggle, for example, to just steer your own boat to the Arctic shore, legally dock, and build your own house and settlement there. For most people, Antarctic opportunities are generally limited to expensive cruises and/or you becoming a scientist successful enough to win a research position there. Failing that, and if you fancy an altogether different type of challenge, you could always enter the Antarctica Marathon, which is held every year. But whatever your reason for traveling, it's not as though you wouldn't encounter an ice wall when you got there. You certainly would do. That's because the edge of the Antarctic ice shelf looks a lot like a large wall made of ice, because it extends so far above sea level. Interestingly, these walls are actually hugely important to the Antarctic climate, because they help the continent to ward off some of the effects of global warming, including rising sea levels. But clearly they're not the same kind of ice walls as those that feature so crucially in the flat Earth theory. They are massive and majestic, that much is true. But modern science doesn't believe that what's hiding behind them is a bottomless drop into the vacuum of space. Ultimately, we so far have no evidence that there really is a wall like this out there. A wall that some theorists claim is separating our earthly plane from the rest of the cosmos, keeping us all penned in just enough to prevent us from slipping off the flatness and into the abyss. For opponents of the flat Earth theory, modern Antarctica is a place of science, not speculation. And while the likes of NASA do have operations out there, including at the IceCube Neutrino Observatory, the US doesn't have a territorial claim. Neither does Russia, China, nor so many other world leaders. So, if the ice wall is there, then none of those world leaders are especially interested in it. But what's perhaps more likely is that there's just nothing to be found. Not unless we decide to ignore the entirety of Antarctic history until this point, and deny all images of Earth from space that clearly show Antarctica and the curvature of the Earth. And that's why there's not a secret ice wall hidden in Antarctica.